We're going to go in Ecclesiastes. We'll look here. We talked about the last time how the reality of Solomon, how he, at this point of his life, he had turned away from God. He had turned away from the hope in Christ. And so his statement over and over, you're going to read in Ecclesiastes, is all is vanity, vanity of vanities. Everything is empty, pointless, means nothing. And he says, under the sun. And so we understand the reality. When you look at the things of this life, you do realize that there is no hope without Jesus Christ. Paul said that. Remember, he said that if Jesus had not risen, we are of all men most miserable. Our preaching is vain. Our faith is vain. And so the reality that if he had not rose from the dead, we don't have that hope. But we do have hope, and we know that he's alive and risen today. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So we rejoice in that. But we want to look in Ecclesiastes in chapter 2. We had talked about how there he dealt with, there chapter 1, how the life is transitory. And life can be easily forgotten as well. And he talked about how, when you try to gain wisdom in different aspects, and the human wisdom, not biblical wisdom. You have to understand he's talking about human wisdom, man's wisdom. He says like catching the wind when you're trying to grasp at knowledge. And so the second thing we find here in this study in chapter 2 is it's not just a problem with the sufferings of life. I had a lot of people that will talk about Job and the sufferings and the hardships of Job. And and we look at this, the reality of life is that you're not going to find contentment even in pleasures. And we'll see this here. There's a problem not just in the pain in life, but also in the pleasures of life. Because all of us, we may think, boy, if I just had this much, or if I had this nice house, or if I just had this, I'll be content, I'll be happy. But we find here, notice in chapter 2, Ecclesiastes chapter 2, in verse 1, he said, I said in my heart, go to now. I will prove you with mirth. I'll test you with pleasure, with partying, with having a good time. Okay? He says, I'm going to do an experiment. And basically Solomon, this is what he's doing. He's experimenting in his life. He's trying to see what is going to bring purpose and meaning and happiness and joy in his life. And so he says, I'm going to prove it by going and partying it up, living it up. And so he says here, therefore enjoy pleasure. Enjoy it. Oh, just bask in that pleasure. And behold, this also is what? Vanity. I said of laughter it is mad, and of pleasure, and of mirth and pleasure, what doeth it? What good does it accomplish? What good does it accomplish to be entertained, to be amused? The reality, sadly we live in a generation that's what we are. We're amused to death. And the word amuse itself means to not think. To not think. And I know for most people they'll say, well, I just got to sit back and relax. And, this helps me here, helps me relax. Well, it doesn't just help you relax. It helps you the way you just don't think anymore. Your mind, you're just amused. And so he says that I went to all these pleasures in my life. I think more than anything we find here is that he indulged in addictive substances. That's the first thing we see. He says, I will prove with the partying and the pleasures. I will test this. And notice what he goes on to say. He says, I saw in my heart to give myself unto what? Wine. Wine. And to lay hold on folly. To lay hold on folly. I looked at the foolish things, and I looked at the wine and the substances, and I went and I said, I'm not going to withhold anything back. I'm going to try this out. I'm going to see maybe there's something in these substances, these addictive substances. And so I began reading about, because obviously, now I've seen the effects. I grew up under the effects of drugs and of alcohol. I've seen that. But I didn't experience that. And the reality, the reason why I didn't experience it, because I saw it in my life. And I saw what it did to people. But here's some things we understand. Most of you know this. when it comes to alcohol, drunkenness, what is it? The side effects. We understand there's slurred and incoherent speech. Hey! Right? Increased aggression, tunnel vision. But what it is that they don't... People will say that they don't focus on anything except what that one person said. They don't think about the consequences. They don't think about the ramifications around them. It's just, what did you say to me? And boy, they're honed in. And it doesn't matter. They're ready. They're ready. Doesn't matter if they're going to embarrass themselves. Doesn't matter how big the guy is. That doesn't matter anymore. Boy, it's just out the window. Mentally, they have a poor balance and clumsiness. They have delayed reflexes. You ever seen drunks get in a fight? They don't look too good the next day. They have stomach pains, vomiting, nausea, a loss of consciousness, blacking out. It sounds like a load of fun. And so then we find another substance, cocaine. What does that do in life? There's a lot of people that have turned to that. It causes an intense high, we know that. It gives this immediate feeling, this high and this relaxation, and then it just immediately goes away. And what happens is it reverses itself. And the side effects is that there's intense depression, there's edginess and anger, there's craving for more of the drug. And so somebody has to get it again. And they want it, they got to get it. And somebody made the statement one time, they said, it's like when someone offers you a piece of bread and you've been starving for days and walking for miles and you just grab it right there, the chance. I mean, you'll do anything for it. And you read about people that have gone so far and they'll do anything. And they lose their homes, they lose their family, they lose their jobs, lose all of that. But they've just got to have that because what? You get this high, but then it reverses itself and they crash. And it is sad because it is so addictive in nature. So can joy be found in that? We understand what happens is when somebody continues, their heart rate increases, they have muscle spasms, convulsions. They begin to make them feel paranoid, angry, hostile, all of this. It sounds really like a dream come true, right? And then the other drug, which has been an epidemic, and a lot of people don't talk about it, heroin. Heroin. And some of you may have known somebody that's been hooked onto that. It enters the brain, it's converted into morphine. And it gives this immediate feeling and surge of pleasure. This is, and for most people, they'll go to certain drugs, but this is the main one. This feeling here. Intense pleasure and pleasurable sensation, they call it a rush. And the intensity of it. What happens though is they begin to take this. The drug will enter the brain, and what happens, it'll flush, it'll cause dry mouth, it'll begin to give them heavy feelings in their life, depression, it causes nausea, vomiting, severe itching that may occur. And then normally they're drowsy for hours, their mental state is clouded, they can't function, they can't think straight, their heart function slows. And this is why in their breathing begins to slow down. And this is why for many people, they end up dying from the heroin. Because it just slows everything down. The mental capacity, the heart rate, the body, all of it slows it down. Well, this is where Solomon is at. And I don't know whether he did this. I believe Solomon is at the point of his life where he tried anything. He tried anything. He said, at this point, I said I'm going to prove and test it out. Whatever it is, I'm going to go and I'm going to try it out. And what does he say? He says, it meant nothing. Pointless. The highs, the desires, the intense pleasures, the all of this, the rush. He says none of it. It was all empty and vanity. We understand not only does heroin cause all that, it can cause permanent brain damage. Or as I say, brain damage. And so then we understand, we realize in this, that there's no purpose, there's no meaning found in that. And we notice what he says, and what's sad is that Solomon himself wrote about the effects of alcohol and the effects of giving yourself over to these drugs and these things that can impact your body. Look with me in Proverbs 23 and notice what he says here in Proverbs 23. Proverbs in chapter 23. It says there in the latter part in Proverbs 23, Solomon writes, he says in verse 29, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has contentions? Who do you see that sorrowful, depression, strife? Who has complaining, babbling? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness and dimness of the eyes? What's he talking about? Somebody that's just gotten over drunkenness in their life. He says, they that tarry long in the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine, they mixed it with other things that cause it to be stronger in effect. He says, look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it gives its color in the cup, when it moves itself aright. At the last it bites like a what? A serpent. It bites like a serpent, and it stings like an adder. Your eyes shall behold strange women, and your heart shall utter perverse things. Well, that's what he's just describing here. A drunkard. They lose the capacity to be able to think straight. He says, and you shall be as he that lies down in the what? In the midst of the sea? I mean, what a perfect description here. Lying in the midst of the sea, clumsiness, all constantly stumbling about. He says, as he that lies up on the top of a mast. And then notice in verse 35, they have stricken me, they shall say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. And the sad reality, I've known of families that their car accidents, somebody's drinking and they're driving, and they end up crashing into the person. And guess what? The people that they crash into die, that person lives. The body's so limber and limp and everything else, and it just seems like they're okay. They live through that. They don't even remember it. They don't even remember it. And what does this man say? He says, they beat me and I didn't even know it. I didn't even feel it. And then what it says, when shall I wake? I will what? Seek it yet again. That is the essence of it. I will seek it yet again. That, and all I have to say, and we understand, there is no true meaning or purpose in addictions. Right. That's drugs, that's pornography, that's alcohol, all of that. Oh, I can stop anytime I want. God wants you to stop. God gives you the power. It's not about what you want, is it? Notice anytime I want. Well, it's not about that. It's about what God wants. And then we find here, so we understand the purpose here. We realize there's no purpose in that. And he said, it's all vanity. I tried it. It meant nothing. It did nothing for me. And then he says in verse 4, now the second thing we see is not only the reality that he indulged in addictive substances, but he was excessive in spending. So now he kind of goes on and he says, that didn't really help. So now I'm going to try something else. I'm going to buy. Shop till you drop. Boy, what a wonderful thing. We spent $60 billion, over $60 billion last year on Black Friday. $60 billion. If you calculate the adults, I began to try to do a little bit of math in this, but if you calculate all the adults in America, that's over $300 a person that spends the money on that day, at that time. $300. Were you there at 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock? Maybe not. But we notice what he says here. Look what he says in verse 4. I made me great works. I built me houses. I planted me vineyards. I increased all of them, my possessions. I spent, I built, I bought. I made me gardens and orchards and planted trees in them, all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that brings forth trees. I got me servants and maidens. and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great cattle, small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I bought, I spent. You know of anybody that money burns a hole in their pocket? Yeah. Some of you may confess to that. You know, you have to rely on your spouse. You know, take it. What we see here, sadly, this is oftentimes what happens when people are depressed and they're discouraged. Boy, they go on a shopping spree. They go on a shopping spree. And I don't think most men, but there might be Bass Pro or something that they go to. I mean, it doesn't have to be the mall. It doesn't have to be that. Now, my worst fear is Walmart. Now, I go there because it's cheap, but boy, you better make sure you're there forever. And so, but we see here, it's sad because he says, I spent, I bought. What is interesting is that we spent $60 billion on that day. But you realize that throughout the year, last year, Americans spent over $100 billion, even some say close to $200 billion, on battling depression. Does it work? You buy and buy and buy, and ooh, I gotta have that. I gotta have this. The new thing. I gotta have this new gadget, new technology. My brother called me a couple of weeks ago, and again, look, your money, you do it, and that's what I tell him. I said, you do what you want with your money. But he called me, and excited, he got him a 2019 Honda Passport. He said, I love it. Oh, it's so nice. I said, well, what was wrong with your 2016 Honda Civic? Well, I said, you got the Passport. And sadly, some people, you got to have the new thing. Comes out every year. Once you buy it, once you pay it off, you know, you're already, 10 years behind on the new stuff. And so we see here, that doesn't, he says, I had all these things, all this stuff. But what do we find? When you read, and I want you to look in 1 John chapter 2. Look what it says in 1 John chapter 2. 1 John in chapter 2, and notice in verse 15. 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15, it says, love not the world, neither the things that are what? In the world. Don't love the things in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, everything that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world what? The world will pass away. We look for new heavens and a new earth wherein dwells righteousness. The world is going to pass away and the lust thereof. But he that does the will of God, what? Abides forever. And so you can spend all you want to. You'll buy the new gadget. You can get all these things. But the reality is going to fall apart one day. It's going to break. I praise the Lord, my laptop's still working. Man, praise the Lord for that. But it calls me to think to myself, hey, any day I can just stick it back on the car and drive off and it'd blow up. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you, by the way. But stuff's going to fall apart. Things break, rust, decay. And we understand one day this world's going to be destroyed. God's going to make a new heaven and a new earth. We know that. So then we go on. It wasn't just the fact that he had excessive spending, but then he said, instead, and not just spending, but then increasing wealth. He wasn't just spending it all, but he was increasing and amassing his fortune as well. And some people, they think that that's what it's going to take. They may not be spending constantly. They're holding on to it. They're amassing their wealth. They got to get, gain. Notice what he says here in verse 8. I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasure of kings and the provinces. All the beautiful things. I got me men singers, women singers, the delights of the sons of men. This he's talking about having his way with all the women. And then he says, as musical instruments as well, and all the sorts. I got all these different things. And I was great, and I increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. And what's interesting is he says here, also my wisdom remained in me. Wisdom. But remember what we're talking about. Was it a godly wisdom that he had? No. This wisdom was man's wisdom. He said, in all of this, I understood. I tried to observe. I believe what Solomon's saying is I tried to observe as I went through this, whether this is going to mean anything to me, whether it really matters, whether it's going to give me satisfaction in life. And he says, I amassed a fortune. I had it all. I was better than anybody else. I had more than anybody else. I had the beautiful treasures. I had all this. Everything. Is that what it takes? Is that what's going to make us happy? We look at Hollywood and we look at, the fame there, and sadly people that worship them and make them their idols. They got to read the magazines and find out, they split up. They're only together 8 months. Man. And it's sad because we look at this and people, they model their lives after them. They look at them, they worship them. And then you find out, of course, how many times you hear about somebody there's an overdose that's happened. The divorce rate in Hollywood is 2 times, and I believe it'll be more than that. But supposedly it is 2 times higher than the average population. And it's no surprise that they die sooner than the average population. There's no surprise there. But I remember reading about a man who had won the jackpot. But some people will say, boy, if I just had it. If I was famous, if I struck it rich, if I amassed this fortune, everything would be great. This man, he won $315 million. His name was Andrew Whitaker. He captured this record-breaking Powerball prize on Christmas Day in 2002. He lived in West Virginia. $315 million. He chose a lump sum payout of $170 million. That was 2002. So then, a lot of money. Well, it's a lot of money now, I'm sure. But Whitaker had good intentions. In fact, he said he planned on donating. He said, I'm getting really excited because of the good works I can do with this money. I'm getting really excited because of good things I can do with this money. But then it says he soon became a cautionary tale. He and his wife divorced. His granddaughter, who appeared with him on national TV, after he won, she died of mysterious circumstances. Whitaker started drinking heavily. He was robbed many times. And he was battling more than 400 legal complaints. And he told ABC News years down the road, he said, I wish I had torn the ticket up and threw it away. I wish I had torn it up and threw it away. And that's not. There was another one I read about in 1997. They won $31 million in the Texas lottery. Billy Bob, Harold Jr. They were excited. Bills could be paid. He could give his wife, 3 children, everything they wanted. They took annual payments of $1.2 million. He purchased new cars and homes for the family. He bought nearly 500 turkeys for the poor. That was good. He played Santa Claus. His mother told People magazine there in 2004. She said he seemed he seemed to think everything would be all right, but it never was the same again, is what she stated. The endless pressure of strangers asking for money took a toll. He was forced to change his phone number more than once. He and his wife separated, and then Time reported that less than 2 years after he hit the jackpot, he took his own life. 2 years. He took his own life. And one attorney said after you win the lottery, he said one of the first things to do is put together a list of people you trust and make one of them a buffer, because someone who will deal with those who come out of the woodwork. He said, because you'll have a target on your back. Amassing a fortune. And Solomon said, I had it all. I spent what I wanted to spend. I did the things I wanted to do. He said, and I had the wealth. I had all of this. We understand the statement, easy come, easy go. Easy come, easy go. It is sad because I remember hearing about one man that him and his family, they were trying to find a place to eat. They were in a town they didn't really know, but they had a casino right there. Next to the casino next to the gambling area was a little buffet place. And they had to go through the casino. They had to go through there to get to there. He said he was so shocked because of the smell that was in that casino, and he wondered why it smelled so bad. And then he found out why. Because many of the people that went in there, they stayed in their seats and they would not give them up, and they wore diapers. Now that's mind-blowing. But to see, for some people, they have to get it, they've got to, and maybe it's the next one, and it'll solve all their problems. And the reality, the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. And those who have sought after it have pierced themselves through with many sorrows. The scripture, it says they've literally pierced themselves, they've hurt themselves by trying to seek after money, wealth. Because you will not. You can't be satisfied in that. You'll never be satisfied. And then the final thing is this. He was unrestrained in his desires. Notice what he says here in verses 10 and 11. Whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. And this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works. He said, anything I desired, I did not keep it from. So maybe it's just to be unrestrained in your desires. Maybe it's just simply to just, whatever you want. Whatever feels good, do it. That's what the world, whatever feels good, do it. And Solomon says, maybe this is it. Maybe now I've got it. If it feels good, if I want it, I better get it. And it'll make me happy, because if I want it and then I get it, I'll be happy. But mankind has an unquenchable thirst. Oh, we do. It's a void and a gap that will never be filled by the things of this world. Right. And Solomon, he says, I didn't restrain myself. Whatever I desired, I did. And look in verse 11, I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I labored to do, and all of it was vanity. It meant nothing. And it was vexation of spirit. There was no profit under the sun. It was very interesting, the statement that he says here, because he says, not only was it vanity in this, but also he says, it vexed my spirit. It vexed my spirit. So I want you to turn with me to Philippians. Philippians in chapter 4, and we'll be finished. Philippians in chapter 4. And notice it says here, Paul says, in verse 11, not that I speak in respect of want. He says, I am not implying to you. He's talking to the believers there in Philippi. He says, I'm not implying to you that I am in need of anything. It's not that I'm telling you that I am wanting you to send me something. He says, for I have learned in whatever state I am therewith to what? Be content. I know how to be abased. I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. And now you see why the next verse is so important. He says, I can do all things through who? Christ, which strengthens me. Boy, that is such a misquoted verse. Such a misquoted verse. Because all Paul was coming across to them and letting them know was, listen, I am not telling you that I need anything. He says, I've been at the lowest of my life. I've been on the mountaintop. He says, I've learned no matter what place I am, where God sends me, where God puts me, I can be content because I can do all things through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. That's the truth of it. Where he says, no matter what in my life, I don't need anything else because it's the strength of Christ, that when I'm weak, then He is strong. When I am powerless, His power is there. And He says, I can rejoice in that. And I've learned. By the way, it's a learning process. We understand. It's not easy, is it? It's not easy. But to learn to be content, no matter if your life is in the hardships, in the storms of life, you can still sit back and you can say, you know what? I know the one who can calm the storm, and I rejoice in that. Paul did. Solomon didn't realize it. He said, all of it's vanity, all of it's pointless, none of it matters. And we realize something. If you look at this world, the drugs, the alcohol, the partying, the living it up, all the desires, the indulgences of the flesh. Las Vegas has one of the highest suicide rates in America. In fact, they did a study that they showed that the people that frequent Las Vegas, they increase their chances of suicide. The people that don't even live there. If you go there, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Boy, wonderful place. The devil has the lights. He's got it all flashing for you. Everything's there. It looks good. It looks good. But it has nothing. It will do nothing for you in the end when you are on your own and you're in the midst of the storm. The only thing is Jesus Christ.